you're ex-Muslim.
Yeah.
So you're qualified to discuss Islam. So no one can jump down your throat in the comments and say, well, what would you know about Islam?
Yeah, that's true.
Tell me what you do know about Islam.
So,
You married a Muslim man, is that right?
I did, yeah, I did. I grew up in a non-religious home. So our home was really non-religious, kind of chaotic, just loads of stuff going on in there, in that home, really far from religion. And then through my home experiences and everything I went through as a child, in a really toxic environment, as a teenager, I went looking for identity, meaning. And I found that meaning in various different things. One of them was that I got involved with gangs. So as a young girl, I was involved with gang members and gangs, and I was in that kind of lifestyle for a while. And what happened was a lot of those gang members were converting to Islam. And so through that was the very first time I heard about Islam, was through these people that were coming out of prison that I knew who had converted to Islam. And so I'd stay up, and I was really drawn to learning about religion, and I was always open. And so I started to learn and to read and to study Islam. And I'd have these long conversations about Islam and about Allah, about God, about all these that I was really drawn. And then what happened, I met my ex-husband, and we fall in love, and eventually, I was only young, I was in my early 20s at this point. And we, I was told that if I wanted to stay in a relationship with him, I needed to get married. So we had an Islamic marriage. And for me, because I wasn't a Muslim, this marriage didn't mean anything to me. It was just a tick box so I could stay in a relationship.
Right.
But it was an Islamic nikah. So we had a nikah ceremony. And it was after that marriage that things in the marital home started to change, where I had to dress a certain way. I had to cover up certain parts of my body, not having them on show, and dress in what they would call a modest way. And so I started to just really hate Islam. I started to hate the culture. I started to rebel against it. I started to just really hate what I felt was control. And I was, in this time, force-fed Peace TV, which is the Islamic TV channel where they have all the Islamic preachers.
The irony.
Peace
TV.
Peace TV, I know, right? Yeah, the irony. So I would be force-fed. I'd have to watch these Islamic preachers, Zakir Naik, Khalid Yassin. One of them was what they would call a revert, somebody who was converted to Islam and wasn't born a Muslim. And so that was how I got introduced to Islam on a more deeper level, was through being in an Islamic culture. The family were very religious. The mother was covered her hair. They prayed 5 times a day. So they were a very religious family. And so it was through that marriage that I started to really study Islam. I would go to the mosque every Sunday, and I was learning the Quran. So I was being taught the Quran. I was being taught about Islam. I was going to these Islamic open days where I would ask questions about Islam, and there was a particular guy there, he's a sheikh, and I would ask him all these difficult questions, and I'm like, no, Islam's not the truth because of this. And we'd go back and forth until eventually, because of the pressure and because of just how uncomfortable I felt in that marriage, we ended up getting divorced. But it was after that I converted to Islam. Myself made a decision to become a Muslim, said my Shahada, which is a confession of faith. You basically profess that there's one God, Allah, and Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. And so I converted to Islam officially, and that was when I became really passionate about Islam, because it was no longer me being forced to be a Muslim, but I was now choosing it myself. And I was at this point, from going back and forth with a sheikh and having these Quran lessons, I was convinced Islam was the truth. So I was in a place where I was now talking to Christians, telling them that Islam is the truth, that the Bible's been changed, and they need to become a Muslim, because if they don't, they're going to go to hell. That Christianity will send you to hell, because that's the only thing that you can do is attributing partners with Allah, is that you can never be forgiven by God, okay? Using that religion to commit in the name of Islam. However, there's nations such as Iran, there's the Iranian regime. Mm-hmm. There's nations like Sudan, like Somalia, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Saudi Arabia. And these nations, their law is Sharia law. And under Sharia law, this is not Islamic extremism. This is not taking verses out of context. This is Islamic law. And under Islamic law, on a regular basis, people are beheaded, slaughtered for leaving Islam and converting to Christianity. Muslims have a problem. They look up highly to Saudi Arabia, okay? Egypt. You just look at Egypt. What happens to people in Egypt when they leave Islam? They get... I was in Egypt last year in the middle of the year, and a whole family was slaughtered and killed for rejecting Islam and coming to and becoming Christians. This happened in Egypt last year. A whole family was slaughtered. So if these verses are taken out of context, these nations are putting laws in place around these verses to people who reject Islam that they practice as a law. This is Sharia law, is in place in these nations. So this is not just Islamic extremism. This is the Islamic ideology. This will shock you. 47% of Muslims that are born outside of the UK, that come to the UK as immigrants, want Sharia law. And this is why you see these people stood on the street shouting Sharia law. They want Sharia law, okay? This is why you see it 10 years ago in Whitechapel. You saw these people patrolling the streets. They were the Muslim Brotherhood patrolling the streets, telling people they couldn't eat certain foods in Whitechapel because it's a Muslim area. You can't drink alcohol in Whitechapel, it's a Muslim area. You can't dress like that in Whitechapel, it's a Muslim area. And they were enforcing Sharia law in the UK, in Whitechapel.
Okay, that's interesting that you think that the Muslim Brotherhood are behind the Islamic invasion, which I would definitely agree with.
Yeah.
You've got no loyalty to Judaism because you're Christian. So there's a lot of people that think the Jews are behind it all. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You just look at the way that Muslims attack Jews. You just look at what happened in Bondi Beach in Australia. Just look at what happened in the synagogue. Okay. The common enemy that we all have is not Jews. Jews are peaceful people. I've never had an issue with a Jew, okay? I've been preaching in Muslim areas because I just like to go to those areas. I like a challenge. And I'm telling you this, I've faced so much threat, violence, like threats of violence, intimidation. I've never felt afraid by a Jewish person. In fact, Jews always celebrate what we do. They say, I'm a Jew, but I like what you're doing. Okay, a lot of the time, particularly Muslim men, will attack. They will shout Allahu Akbar. They'll repel the Christian message, and only has it been with Muslim, particularly men, sometimes women, that I've felt in danger when I've been sharing the Christian message in the UK, in a Christian country, on the streets. So I believe with the immigration, we're seeing. I do believe there's an agenda to come here and to make this nation an Islamic nation in the United Kingdom. It's like Christians have become the minority and they've become the discriminated against group. And what you will often see is you will see that Muslims are allowed to do these huge events. So you saw it on London Bridge. I think it was either London Bridge or Tower Bridge in London a few years ago. There was a huge Islamic call to prayer that was being echoed over the River Thames. And the police were there lining up, protecting them, facilitating it to happen. And then when it comes to Christians doing stuff, it seems to be blockaded, stopped and restricted all the time. And an example of that is back in October, there was a Jesus march that was going to take place along the streets of Whitechapel, where they were going to do a march for Jesus there. And it was banned, it was stopped. And around the same time that the march was going to take place, there was, that same weekend, 1,000 Muslim men masked up in black masks, all wearing black, marched those streets, claiming that land for Allah, declaring Allahu Akbar, declaring that land belonged to Allah. And so we're seeing this regularly with this discrimination against Christians and this let's promote and support Islam and let's just make way for Muslims to do what they want to do, but let's stop Christians at all costs doing anything. The most recent time that happened was was a week ago. There was a March for Jesus going to take place again along the streets of Whitechapel. It was banned. There was an accusation made that it was a political march, that it was an anti-immigration march, that it was an anti-Islamic march. But actually, the whole focus of that march was to exalt Jesus, to worship Jesus, to pray, to worship, to sing songs about Jesus. And that's what was going to be happening that day. But it was banned.